What Andrew said is right. I've heard Jim Fay say it. I've heard Jim Fay say this without it. The firm boundaries. If your boundaries aren't firm, they're not boundaries. They're suggestions. All right? So these are boundaries. And when we set a boundary as an adult, what we're supposed to do is mean it. And if we don't mean it, we shouldn't have set that one. If it's not firm, we should have come up with the one that was. And if we're setting one too soon and decide to take it back, it's going to create questions of future boundaries and stuff like that. So adults set loving boundaries in loving ways, which means there's a lot of love. That's the love in Love and Logic. And what a lot of people do is forget the love piece, the empathy piece, that we're sad for them. This is a hard lesson to learn. And here's the boundary that I set as an adult. It's one of the ways that we get to demonstrate that we're adult, that we can feel bad, and we're going to make a hard rule. We're going to hold our boundary. And yep, we really are bummed for you. This really does suck. And I'm not going to back down on it. And that's what adults get to do. We feel bad, so we back down. No, that's what teenagers do. We set a boundary, we retract it because someone didn't like our boundary. Nah, that's called codependency. We set firm boundaries, we set loving boundaries, and we set those loving boundaries with love. I love you, and I am not willing to pay for electronics to someone who uses them to send pictures of themselves to boys. I will not spend my money on that. You can. And they can. They can go get their own phone plan because they went to Taco Bell and got a job without you and bought their phone without you and started a plan without you, and now they're sending pictures of their tatas without you. And that's what adults can do. And that's why they're interested in doing it. Because adults do that, you know. There's a few websites on the internet where people are showing their tatas. Just one or two. But that's what adults do, which is why it's conceived in the teenager's brain as that's something that adults do. So if I do that, I must be an adult. Any questions about this? The loving part is the hard part.
And I think the firm boundaries are a struggle for a lot of us.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you've got to really think out the boundary and then be willing to live with it. And I think sometimes we get stuck, or I get stuck in the moment of trying to control, trying to change, rather than set the boundary and live with it.
I think that there's a few of the rules of Love and Logic that that really put the answer to that one, and I think one of the ones that is when new staff members come in. When we talk about the RX system of how a kid can earn consequences and stuff like that delays gratifying moments like passes or phase moves and things like that, this is one of the pieces that's really difficult. And we have empirical evidence that when a staff member violates this piece, that it blows up in their face, not the kid's face. The kids, when the staff member misuses it, the kids are like, oh, baby, I know how to handle this one. And they drive the staff member insane. Andrew, what were you going to say?
Well, I thought what you were going to get at was the rule of Love and Logic where you share control.
Oh, right. And we will get to that one, where we share control. Yeah. And these are the main ones that we use at the facility. There's a lot of rules to Love and Logic, a lot of techniques. Couple things. Number one, we all have a gift package for you that contains Love and Logic books and CDs and DVDs. Number two, there are a ton of videos on YouTube and stuff about Love and Logic. And the guy, Jim Fay, and his son, who are the primary teachers of it, and Jim Fay is one of the founders with it. Jim and Charles Fay are their names. Foster Klein was one of the other founders. He is no longer involved with Love and Logic. But Jim and Charles Fay, they're very funny when they teach. They're great classes, very entertaining. Delaying the consequence. When a child does something, one of the only ways to set firm, loving boundaries in a loving way is we have to be in wizard mode. Just plain and simple. Love and Logic supports the wizard mode concept. because we're not asked to pull a warrior in that moment. In fact, it backs up the wizard concept because we're going to step back from the situation and we're going to check the curvature of the earth, the wind speed, the bullet type, the amount of gun. We're going to check everything before we pull that trigger because we want a one-shot, one-kill experience with this consequence. And we still may miss, because they may move at the last second or do another thing or change it. We might wait 3 days to impose a consequence, and in those 3 days they pull another doozy. And then you kind of have to say, we're going to have a conversation tomorrow about the consequence for this thing, but now that this new thing is in play, I think we have to go back and have another conversation. So we were going to talk about not blah, 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 but now we got to figure something else out. Try not to worry about it. And then you go back to the drawing board with it. But we delay the consequences. There's very little that can be delivered in the moment that will have any effect. And if we deliver it in the moment, they're going to focus on you, not what they did and not the consequence. I went to Kalen the other day because there was I'm finding chewed up stevia packets on the floor. And it looks like someone spit gum on the floor. And I picked this dried thing up, and it's a chewed up stevia packet. And I was like, what are these chewed up stevia packets? And then Maria said, oh, the boys are chewing them like chewing gum. And they're spitting them out on the floor. Addicts are the most clever, resourceful people you will ever find.
If you put their minds to good.
If you would just take your Sith ways and become a Jedi.
We would have cured cancer by now.
So, but one of the, about a week and a half ago, I walked in the room and Leo was in his room, sniffing around. And I was staying in the room and Kalen walked in and said, what are you doing in my room? And I said, I'm watching Leo. Is he going to poop? And I said, no, he's sniffing for food. I wonder why. And he went, there's no food in here. And I said, do you know the face has 72 signs of lying? And I know them all. And he goes, I'm not lying. There's no food in here. And like his hands are just frozen. He's holding on for dear life. And I said, well, the dogs seem to be pretty interested in your room. Well, it's probably because of my toothpaste. And I said, maybe. Well, we'll see what happens. Don't worry about it. And I just let it go. Now I find out a couple weeks later that they're stolen stevia packets and they're chewing them like chewing gum. So I walked up to Kalen yesterday, during our all-staff meeting. And I said, God, I'm finding all these chewed up stevia packets on the floor. I was hoping you guys would be able to handle that, but I guess you can't. Kalen, do you mind getting all the packets you stole out of your room and bringing them and giving them to Lynn? And he was like, okay. And he went into his room and he came up with this gigantic handful and handed them to Susie, one of the cooks. And she's looking at it and she's like, and he walks away and everything. And then later on I said, just casually, do you guys know how many days stealing food is? Because I don't remember right now. And I had asked Michael. I was like, do you guys, how long is He's like 1 to 3. 1 to 3 days
Per
added.
packet.
Yeah, and I said, I just casually said, how many days added is stealing food? And Kalen goes, 1 to 3. He knows the consequences. And I said, oh, okay, that's all we have to say. And we'll pass on to DC staff, make sure you put an extra 3 days added for stealing food. And no one's going to question it. We're not going to have a big blowout. But what we didn't do is like come in aggressive. I can't believe it. You could bring in the ants or the bears and the mountain lions and the dogs killing each other over stevia and mice. What are you doing? And you're stealing. Don't you know core value system? What is taking? Had to have none of that. I had to have none of that conversation. I barely did any work whatsoever. One of my favorite things was when my children, they had their bedrooms and they had a shared play area. And they would leave their stuff in the play area. And Chris's my room rule was you're welcome to have your rooms be in whatever condition you desire. That space is yours. But the rest of the house is a shared area and it will be clean. Is that agreeable? And, yep, okay, great. And then when they leave their stuff out, anything they left out, I had a little game. I would walk up and I'd pick it up off the floor and I'd walk up to their room and I'd open the door and throw it and slam the door before I heard it hit something. Then I'd just walk away. I didn't care what it was. And I told them, I said, if you leave things out, and this is before I ever did anything, if you leave things out, I'm happy to pick them up and put them in your room. And they were like, oh, sweet, now Aaron's cleaning the room. They just didn't like how I was putting it in the room. There's a broken dish in my bed! And I said, oh, is that what that sound was? So when I threw the dish in your room and slammed the door, I heard something break. I didn't know if it was a lamp or the dish. You broke a dish in my bed! I know. Well, how am I going to sleep? I don't know. I mean, there's the floor, and there's cleaning up your bed, and there's not leaving dishes so that I throw them in your room. I'm okay with all of them. And it drove him crazy, but they stopped leaving. They would get up to go to bed. I'd hear their doors close, and then I'd hear it open. I'd hear them come back out, pick up dishes, and take them back into their room. And the door would close again. And you front load it. And the consequence doesn't become an immediate reaction to anger. It becomes your game. It's something they know, but you don't have to impose it right away. They'll remember. Any questions on delaying the consequence? Okay.